Hello, everybody. I recently went on a trip to Japan, and I knew going into that trip that I'd be coming home with some perfumes because A, the duty free options are great, and B, the exchange rate strongly favors the US dollar. So, in this video, I'll run through the perfumes I picked up on that trip. Starting off with this gorgeous floral right here, this is a flanker of Quelques Fleurs, which was originally launched way back in 1913 by Houbigant. It's safe to assume that the Quelques Fleurs of today is vastly different from the Quelques Fleurs of the early 1900s, but it's still a distinctly floral composition. This flanker, called Jardin Secret, takes that scent profile and steers it into a greener direction. And when I say green, it's not quite as reminiscent of a garden as something like Frederick Mall's Synthetic Nature. The green here serves to brighten the fragrance, make it feel fresher, and in some ways more evocative of springtime. This to me feels like it's maybe catering to a younger demographic, while the original might appeal to a more mature crowd. Overall, it feels like a happy fragrance, and it's a beautiful choice for spring. The next fragrance is another one by Houbigant, and this time it is La Belle Saison, which directly translates to the beautiful season, but typically implies just warmer weather in general. Surprisingly, this feels, at least to me, like less of a warm weather fragrance than Jardin Secret, just because what I get from this is a much more sweet and honeyed scent profile, likely from the mimosa. It has a density to it that I don't think I'll particularly enjoy in a Southern California summer, but we'll see. For warm weather florals, I typically prefer them to be on the drier, greener side. And like I said, this one just feels kind of too sweet, and it feels juicier and a little fruitier, but in a kind of denser way. Do I like it? Yeah. I mean, I picked up a bottle, but I just don't think it quite fits its name. It's a gorgeously deep and honeyed floral, and I think it's much more appropriate for maybe autumn or kind of earlier in the spring. Next up, we have this one, which probably doesn't need an introduction. This is the infamous Chanel No. 5. It's, as you all know, one of the most well-loved fragrances of all time. No. 5 opened my palate up to floral fragrances and was basically my gateway to vintage-leaning scent profiles. And for this reason, it always has a space on my shelf. I have various iterations of No. 5 in my collection, including some vintages like the Eau de Cologne, the vintage Eau de Toilette, the Extrait or Parfum, as well as some modern iterations of it. Of course, the Eau de Parfum, the low version, and Eau Premiere, and of course, the modern Eau de Toilette. This right here is the newer version of the modern Eau de Toilette. There has been a lot of speculation about a reformulation of this modern Eau de Toilette, but I personally detect no real differences in the juice. I've done tests on this along with the last version of the modern Eau de Toilette, and really don't detect too much in the way of differences from the top all the way to the dry down. And even Chanel sales associates have communicated this to customers, so it's not really surprising. I think the presentation has obviously changed, so I don't know, maybe folks are kind of struggling to come to terms with the juice not changing along with it. But anyhow, I will say that the presentation is a big upgrade in my opinion. The caps are now magnetic and similar to those found in the Les Exclusifs line. And also, the atomizers are smoother, and the spray is mistier and more uniform. The bottle shape is a little bit more compact. The previous version was a kind of taller, slimmer bottle. And so all these changes to me in the presentation do add value, and whether that to you is worth a purchase is, of course, up to you. But I myself really like it, and as a big fan of number 5, I wanted to have it in my collection. Here we have another Chanel. Of the numbered Chanel perfumes, I either own or know pretty well. Think, number 5, number 22, 1957, etc. On a spectrum of heaviness, I think 1932 falls somewhere in the middle. Number 22, to my nose, is probably the dustiest and most aldehydic of the bunch, followed by number 5, and then 1932 comes in with some brighter florals and a smidge of fruitiness, while 1957 is the clean, musky, aldehydic option that, personally, I kind of find a bit boring. 1932 smells like a really nice soap. It's like when you wash your hands in a luxury hotel. The soap just hits different, especially when they also have those really thick towels laid out on the counter. The whole experience has you thinking, man, this is the life. It's giving that energy, and unsurprisingly, it's coming from Chanel, who are experts on that kind of thing. So if you're in the market for a fragrance that smells clean, pretty, and polished, this one's a spectacular option. I know that this comes with an equally hefty price tag, and understanding that there are plenty of other options out there to choose from. This certainly doesn't have to be the only one that you go for if you're looking for a fragrance of this kind. But for me, it kind of checked all the boxes I was looking for in a higher end kind of soapy fragrance. The next perfume here is this little guy, which is a smaller version of a perfume that maybe a lot of you may have heard of already. And I'll start by saying that I'm a big fan of iris fragrances in general, this being one. Across the range of varieties, from floral to vegetal to lipsticky to papery, I like iris, and I know that many of you also do. Among our large circle of fellow iris enthusiasts, I've heard a lot of great things about this fragrance, and while I do like it, something has just kind of held me back from buying a full bottle. Here you can see I've opted for just the 15 ml version. I'm telling myself for now that if I so happen to be drawn to this fragrance enough and therefore use up this entire quantity, then it would be at that point, and possibly that point only, when it would be clear to me that I should upgrade to the larger size. So this is Le Bras de Morphee by Hellenist. It's a powdery and nutty take on iris. It's giving me Dior Homme Original, but this leans more on the gourmand side. It's not quite gourmand per se, but the nuttiness is prominent and it feels more dense. I actually think it shares similarities with Iris Malikan by Maison Crivelli. It has a similar richness and heaviness that I think is appropriate for cooler weather. And now that I think about it, maybe I've kind of held off on a full bottle of this because I do already own both Dior Homme Original and Iris Malikan, so this felt like there was maybe too much overlap. And despite that, I do still have to give this a full wear someday, so I'll see if my opinions change down the road. The next perfume is this one right here. I purchased this from one of my absolute favorite shops in Kyoto, Japan, called Le Sillage. And so when you enter this shop, it feels almost like a museum. Like everything is exquisitely displayed. It's like these perfumes are part of some actual art exhibit. The ambiance is impeccable. It's just amazing all around. And the staff not only look extremely polished, but they also truly know their stuff. So now onto this perfume. The brand Chapel Factory caught my eye because I just hadn't heard of them before. When I sniffed through the collection in store, it was clear that the kind of through line across the fragrances was incense. Everything had some degree and flavor of incense. And among the selection, the one that stood out to me was Hermit Coat. It's a lighter incense supported by heliotrope, so while it does have an ashy quality, certainly, it's also lifted by florals and a slight sweetness. To me, it's extremely pleasant and very wearable all year round, in my opinion. And this was an instant love for me. I sometimes struggle with incense because I don't always want to smell like a church or like I'm in the middle of a ritual or like I'm at a shrine or something. And sometimes I just want a touch of something smoky. And this hits that sweet spot right on the head. And before I kind of conclude on this one, back to the shop itself, when I asked to sample Hermit Coat on strip, they took me to the long table at the center of the store. They had me kind of sit down there, and then they went around the shop to pull fragrances that I might also kind of like based on this pick. They put each of those fragrances on test strips, and then they encouraged me to even smell them in the outdoor courtyard, which was accessible right there from within their store, just so that the smell that I was kind of sampling wouldn't be tainted by other smells in the store. Like it was a true kind of niche perfumery store. So for me, that was an absolute 10 out of 10 experience. And then this next perfume that I got, this was definitely, I definitely kind of picked up quite a number in Japan. I picked up this next one at the No Shop in Osaka, and there was a great selection of brands to sniff through there, but when deciding which perfume to buy, I really wanted to make sure I picked one that was not readily available here stateside, and so this fit the bill. This is Posthume by Venin. And let me first just read the description on the brand's website so you get an idea. Posthume is the scent of Nordic heritage, thousands of years of cold climate and extreme nature. Tar from our sacred buildings, texture from the nature that surrounds us, we created a sensory reenactment of our heritage. This is where we come from. This is our inherent creature. Honestly, I had originally assumed that the name referred maybe to something relating to death or after death, since this does have that, since those words do kind of insinuate that, and the scent profile is kind of smoky, leathery, animalic, and seemingly fitting of a name that would refer to something kind of death related. So I was surprised to see that the brand's target here was nothing like I'd imagined. And anyway, neither here nor there. I can perfectly enjoy this perfume just based on the scent alone. It doesn't necessarily have to correspond to the name. It's still a fantastic perfume. And this one happened to be the winner in the independent category of the 2020 Art and Olfaction Awards. So that's pretty cool. Moving on further to describe a little bit more about this actual scent, I can definitely detect each of the listed notes. Here we have cinnamon, clove, tobacco, smoke, leather, tonka bean, vetiver, vanilla. But on top of all that, and there is quite a detectable, prominent, and in my opinion, undeniable cumin note that is not listed in the notes for this fragrance, and that cumin note gives this a sweaty, animalic facet, especially in the beginning. And you might think, oh, that's why I might not have liked it, but wrong. that's what I was actually drawn to. I really do like the kind of borderline or full-on BO thing that some perfumers can achieve in a tasteful way. And I will emphasize tasteful here because, if I was looking for straight up BO, I can easily get that myself without having to spray anything on. But all that to say, this does mellow out in the dry down, and ultimately it settles into a very balanced yet interesting scent. So I would highly recommend trying out this fragrance and see what you think. When I got this, I did let the rest of my family kind of sample it, thinking that they would pick up kind of on the BO quality of it, but most of them found it to be quite pleasant. And that was on strip after it had dried down for a couple hours at that point. So you can see, I was able to tell based on their kind of reactions that that initial cumin note doesn't linger for long, and it does eventually kind of get balanced out by the rest of the notes in this composition. So the last and final fragrance that I purchased in Japan at the duty free is this guy right here. I've had Vetiver Tonka by Hermes on my buy list for quite some time. It's a gorgeous vetiver fragrance complemented by sweetness by the tonka bean. And despite the presence of tonka bean, it never quite veers away from vetiver, and that's the part I love. The earthiness and kind of dry, grassy qualities of vetiver are still easily detectable here, especially in the dry down. Vetiver Tonka is interesting and masterfully crafted, in my opinion, and still quite appealing and office appropriate. It's one of those fragrances that you reach for when you want something not boring for the office. When you don't feel like throwing on maybe yet another citrus or blue fragrance. As a quick note on the presentation, I do like these Hermes bottles. I think they're simple, but they do feel true to Hermes, especially with the leather-like cap and the stitches paying homage to their history and their focus on leatherwork. So that concludes this rundown of my recent pickups in Japan. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these fragrances. Until next time.